Welcome to episode 14 of the Liberty Itch podcast. My guest today is Libertarian Party member of the New South Wales Legislative Council, the Honourable John Ruddick. I was tempted to interview John about his frankly epic maiden speech to the New South Wales Parliament in 2023. The speech was a masterclass in realpolitik. He bluntly yet charismatically castrated Australian government positions on COVID, climate change, gun control, defence, the economy and more. The speech was so brilliantly articulated and honest that it was banned from YouTube. Because of course it was. But it has since been re-uploaded, and I encourage you to watch it if you have not seen it. Link is in the description below. Alternatively, I could have discussed John's 2018 book, Make the Liberal Party Great Again. It is probably more relevant now, immediately after the 2025 federal election, than it was even in 2018. John was with the New South Wales Liberal Party for over 2 decades. In 2021, he defected to what is now known as the Libertarian Party in justified disgust of the Liberal government's COVID response. John knows the inner workings and dysfunction of the New South Wales Liberal Party intimately. So it is against that backdrop that I asked John for his assessment of the 2025 federal election. How did Labor win on such an appalling policy platform? What the hell is going on with the Liberal Party? Why is the preferential voting system so misrepresented in the media? And what do the Freedom Parties do now? Mr. John Ruddick, thank you very much for coming on the Liberty Itch podcast. Welcome.
Looking forward to having a discussion, Damon. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Yes, well, I'm talking to you shortly after the federal election. Unfortunately, Australia lost. The Labor Party won, and I just jotted down a few notes as to the policy platforms that they won on. There was increasing taxes, worsening the housing crisis, increasing energy costs and unreliability, increasing immigration, increasing debt, worsening the cost of living, censoring the internet, and then ignoring the voice referendum results. What's your assessment of the election and how they managed to win on those policy platforms?
Well, that is a very depressing rundown, but sadly it's a very accurate rundown.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Look, it is an extraordinary result, okay? And I had an article in the Financial Review where I mentioned this point. So every federal government since 1931 in this country has been re-elected at least once. Okay, now most people know that, but politically people, interested people. But what is far less known is that every election since about that time, while every federal government has got re-elected, 100% of them have always also had a swing against them when they went to get their second term. Now, yes. And sometimes they were quite significant swings. You think about in 1998, John Howard was going for his second term. Kim Beazley won the two-party preferred, okay? Now then, Kevin 07, 2007, when Labor went to get re-elected in 2010, they won by one vote, okay, in the House of Representatives. And Robert Menzies got a big kick in the bum in 1951. Gough Whitlam got a big kick in the bum. Now then, and Abbott wins in 2013. The Liberals win. Turnbull won by 1 seat, okay, in 2016. So there is this pattern where the people of Australia will give them a second go. It's probably just the good nature of the Australian people. They'll give them a second go, but they give them a bit of a kick in the bum. Okay, it's probably healthy, probably good democracy. Okay, and the polls had said for a year that a similar thing was going to happen. Albanese was probably going to get re-elected, but there was going to be a swing against him. That's what it looked like. What happened? There was a 2.7% swing, two-party preferred, to the Labor Party. That's a big deal. Okay, and it's historically unprecedented. Now, so what's going on? Well,
they obviously performed so well in their first term that everybody was just impressed and wanted them back for more of the same.
Yeah, well, it obviously wasn't that, because the polls were saying for most of the past 12 months that there was going to be a swing against, and they were saying that. And Albanese is still not popular. You know, I mean, he might be more popular than Mr. Dutton, but we'll get to Mr. Dutton in a moment. I think that the biggest factor probably was Trump. Okay, now, bottom line is I love Trump. Really? I've loved Trump since the 1980s. Okay, I think Trump's a really good person. and I think he's a really good leader. I think he's doing a lot of good things around the world. He's not a libertarian, okay? He's got libertarian instincts in a lot of matters, but he's pretty good on, the foreign wars. He's good against all the woke BS, good against climate change. He just comes out and says, I don't believe in it. He says it's garbage, okay? Now, John Howard and Tony Abbott believe that, but they didn't have the courage to say it. Trump does. So I'm pro-Trump. But, and he's such a force of nature. Now, now what we saw in Canada, a month before our election was, clearly that was the Trump effect. Okay, yes. Now, I just think, if there's a 2.7% swing towards Labor at this election, I think, that means about 3 in 100 Australians have done something that we did not expect them to do. And I think they've just probably people, low information voters who fell for this myth about orange man bad, tariffs and everything else. And I think that is, and I did not expect it. Before the election, I thought, no, the Trump factor is not a big deal. But I mean, what else explains it? Now, then on top of that, look, Mr. Dutton I've never met him. I know lots of people who do know him, and they all tell me he's a really good guy and he's pretty smart and he's pretty conservative. Okay, but gee, he came across as very unlikable and weak. Okay, now, halfway through the campaign, the UK Supreme Court comes out and says they defined what a woman was. Okay, a massive landmark case, and the Australian courts and the Australian Parliament.
It's a big deal. We haven't been able to figure this out for the last 15,000 years of human existence, so it's great that they finally decided.
Yes. And they just simply came out and they said, look, we respect transgender rights, etc. And we don't believe in discrimination. However, gender is a product of biology, not identity. Very simple. Okay, and who can argue with it? And the whole trend in the world is going away from this transgender extremism. Okay. Yeah. But then Peter Dutton's asked about it. Says, what did you think about the UK Supreme Court ruling? He says, I don't want to get into cultural battles. Doesn't apply to us. And I just thought, gee, that's so weak. And then there was a Liberal candidate in the seat of Whitlam, which was a 5% Labor seat. We were never going to win it, but we had a pretty good candidate there. Used to serve in the Defence Force, and he'd said, a year ago or something that he thought he just questioned whether women should serve on the front line in the ADF. Okay, now maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. Okay, but they went and disendorsed him over that. Now I'm pretty sure his electorate would agree with it. Everyone I know agrees with it. Okay, you don't have to be an arch conservative to at least discuss it.
Most women would agree with it. It's like
that's right.
We want equal rights, except when it comes to being shot at. Yeah,
that's right. Yes. And so there was this, and then he didn't want to get out of the Paris Agreement. Wanted to go along with the global warming. Then he came out with this huge nuclear program, which the Libertarian Party has long supported an Australian nuclear power industry. But our policy is simple. We just say, look, no bans, no subsidies. Let the free market flourish. We didn't want to make it a public service thing. Dutton was going to spend hundreds of billions on it.
$600 billion, I think he said.
Well, that's what his critics in the Labor Party said, which was probably just made up. But he didn't refute it, so everyone's walking around thinking, $600 billion. Now he just went quiet on it. So, and then there were ads all over the place with the Liberal Party saying, "Vote Liberal, and we'll cut 25 cents per litre off your petrol." Okay, for 1 year.
For 1 year. Yeah. Wow. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
So it was, and then he's gone and lost his seat. The Canadian opposition leader lost his seat as well.
It's incredible.
So, look, I think it was a case of, Trump, and I think Dutton was weak, and Dutton was rightly or wrongly not popular. And then they just they would come out with policies, but it just felt like they were half baked, and they didn't have conviction behind them. I think they assumed, since The Voice lost, which was a 60-40 thumping for Albo. I think looking back, Dutton and his team made a decision. We're on track to victory. Let's be a small target strategy. And the great Donald Trump has taught us the left is so powerful today. There's only one way to push back against them, and that's be on the front foot. Don't take their crap, and Mr. Dutton wanted to meekly and mildly go along with it.
Yeah, yeah. There's a rumour out there that I've read about saying that it was actually the New South Wales branch of the Liberal Party, the insiders, who to summarise the effect, they white-anted Dutton's campaign, or the entire Liberal campaign. You were in the Liberal Party in New South Wales. What can you tell me about that? Is there truth to this? Is this, I mean, it all seems extremely dysfunctional within the Liberal Party nationally, but obviously New South Wales, Victoria are the main ones. What can you talk to this, or just move on to the next question?
No. I'm happy to talk about it. I did write a book, 5, 6, 7 years ago called "Make the Liberal Party Great Again." So, in the first half of the Liberal Party's history, from about 1944 to sort of the John Howard period, all the federal Liberal parliamentary leaders were from Victoria. Robert Menzies, Harold Holt, John Gorton, Billy Snedden, Malcolm Fraser, Andrew Peacock, Liberal, all Victorians. The Victorians ran the party. Now, then what's happened since the 1980s, Howard, the New South Wales has run the party now, with two exceptions. Alexander Downer briefly, he's from South Australia, he briefly was the leader. And then we've had Peter Dutton. But New South Wales has run the Liberal Party for the last generation, and on balance, it's been pretty successful. They've held government a lot more than Labor, and they've had, in New South Wales, they just finished sort of a 12-year term, which is pretty good for the Liberal Party. So the Liberal Party in New South Wales is notorious for factional conflict. In fact, one of my hobbies, Damien, is that I like to read old newspapers, which are all online now. It's fantastic. And there's this report when Robert Menzies addressed the first ever meeting of the New South Wales Liberal Party at the Sydney Town Hall in about 1945. And he says, as I've travelled around this country and I've visited the state divisions of this new party, some of the other divisions are peaceful, some of them are warlike, but he said nothing compares to New South Wales. Okay. And so it just has had this culture. And he didn't mean it in a good way. No, he did not mean it in a good way, no. And so there has been this, look, and we've had a right-wing faction, which was at some points in time very right-wing. It's had a left-wing faction, which is very left-wing. Okay, and now what has happened is that left-wing faction has dominated in the last 20, 30 years. And yes, a lot of them, they are all 100% signed up for global warming. Didn't do them any good because they lost all their seats to the Teals, all their blue ribbon seats, the last couple of elections. But they are. Well,
it doesn't seem like to be on brand, does it? It's if that's your ethos, wouldn't you go where that's your ethos? It seems, well, somewhat unusual.
Yes.
No.
So this allegation about that they wanted him to lose, they wanted Dutton to lose because they sort of love global warming policies and they love all the associated money with it. Look, that is possible, okay, but look, I think it's probably true that there were elements in the left that were hoping that Dutton would win, but I think that they would have been that would have been a private thought. I didn't really see them leaking. Now, 3 years ago, they leaked against Catherine Deves badly, and they not just leaked, they publicly said, I wouldn't vote for it. Yes, sitting members of parliament said that, because she was against the transgender BS. But look, another factor that happened to the New South Wales Liberal Party is that about a year ago, there was a federal intervention into it from the federal executive, which is, I think it's unprecedented. One or two might have happened, but it was, so the federal executive basically dismissed the state executive and said, we'll now run the division. And that was something that was celebrated by the right-wing faction because they weren't dominating the existing state executive. Now, that was a gamble, because if Dutton had won and he was with the right-wing faction, it would have been seen as vindication, but the gamble did not pay off. Now that they've lost badly, they're going to say this right-wing takeover was a disaster. Look at the election results. It's going to be hard to argue against that, isn't it? So what's going to be happening is the left will soon, I understand, be returned to power in the New South Wales division. But look, we're probably at a low watermark now for the Liberal Party. Everyone's got despair and saying, all the pundits are saying how terrible it is. Look, it probably can't get worse than this. And having a strong federal Labor government, history says that's actually good for state Liberal governments, parties trying to beat Labor governments, because particularly in New South Wales and Victoria, they like to alternate. If Canberra's run by Labor, then the people of New South Wales like Sydney to be run by, or New South Wales to be run by the Liberal Party. That's a fairly reasonably strong pattern that you see there. So that bodes well for the New South Wales opposition leader and the Victorian opposition leader. So the Liberal Party has had bad moments before. This is definitely the worst since 1943, which was the United Australia Party then. But I think they had a federal election in the middle of World War II when John Curtin is, along with the Americans, is defeating, rolling back Imperial Japan. And we had an election in the middle of that, and the people overwhelmingly, almost 60%, voted for the Labor Party in that election. So it's not as bad on this occasion, but this is pretty bad.
It is. Throughout Europe and America, I mean, we can, looking at the Trump effect, Trump, a lot of people are arguing, is not a Republican. He's definitely not a rhino. He's a new breed. He's effectively an independent who's taken the party over to use the apparatus to actually forward an agenda which the people have broadly supported. Throughout Europe, you're seeing the exact same effect with the rise of the AfD. I mean, the shenanigans going on in Romania, where the guy who should have won, they just cancelled the election and did it all over again. Le Pen in France, they're doing what they're doing against her. We're not my sense of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Australians aren't overly impressed with the uni party, with either side, Labor or Liberals. That's borne out by the fact that statistically the share is now basically at that 2/3 level of Labor plus Liberals, down from 90+% in the past. How would you assess the performance of the independents and particularly the freedom parties? And is there who's going to be the Trump or the Millet to come out in Australia? There doesn't seem to be any sense of it, just like Canada. No sense of one of these disruptive figures or a Farage type figure in Australia.
Well, look,
how
Farage
are you seeing?
Okay, what's happening with Farage is extremely encouraging. He's the favourite on the polls. He's the favourite in the betting markets to be the next Prime Minister of Great Britain. That's a big deal. Now, this AfD in Germany, I'd read in the Sydney Morning Herald and the ABC for the last 20 years that they were Nazis. I read their policy platform recently. They're fantastic. They're very libertarian. Now, Le Pen, on economics, she does like a big government, I think. But I mean, I do believe the biggest issue facing France is immigration, and immigration. There will be no France if they keep going. So, I hope Le Pen does well. Sweden, Italy. You mentioned Romania. There wouldn't be many Aussies in Australia that know what's happening in Romania, but yes, I have been following that. I knew a few people. I met this guy, George Simon, who almost got elected overnight, but sadly fell short. But look, these are all insurgent right-wing movements. You mentioned Millet. He's the best in the world, of course. Now, but we're not seeing this in Australia. Now, the biggest part of that is that we do have a highly fragmented minor right, which is suicidal. So what we have about 12% of people in the country are voting for a minor right party. One Nation, Clive Palmer's latest outfit, the Glorious Libertarians, Christian parties, shooter parties, others, anti-vax parties, okay. And they all agree on 90% of stuff, Damon. They all agree, that 10%, libertarians don't believe in tariffs. John Ruddick and Pauline Hanson do. Well, how often does tariff policy come up in Parliament? The global warming carbon, the transition to the carbon economy, that comes up every day. Well, we all agree on that. Now, what we have over on the minor left, we have a little party called the Greens. Now, let's put aside their policies. Very successful. Okay, they get about 10, 11% of the party, and it capped out about 15 years ago that they got to about 10%. Doesn't go any higher, doesn't go any lower. About 1 in 10 people, in Australia like the Greens. Now, the Greens are very pure. They don't give an inch. They say exactly what they want, what they believe in, and that gets that 10% locked in. I am a Green, enough people say. What does that 10% give them? Only 12 senators out of 76. That's an enormous amount of power. I'm sitting here in the Legislative Council in New South Wales right now while we're talking. There's 42 members of the upper house. 4 of them are Greens. They're the 4 most active people in there, except for the glorious Libertarian member. But they've got a lot of power with just 10 to 12%. Now, the minor right is getting almost exactly the same amount of votes. And every election, the Greens get 1 senator from every state. Tasmania, Queensland, New South Wales, they get 1 senator out of 6. But then the senators get a double term, so that's how they've got 12. And that could be the minor right team. That could be the minor right if we were a consolidated force. Now, we're not going to merge. Well, it's maybe not impossible, but I don't think it's going to emerge. I mean, look, I'd be open to have a discussion, okay, but I think the better way to do it, because we do have differences, we definitely do have differences, but I think the better way to do it, and I've proposed this in Spectator and a few other places, is that about 3 to 6 months before a federal election is due, we should have a meeting in all the capital city town halls, so the Adelaide Town Hall, Melbourne Town Hall, the Sydney Town Hall, and we invite, whatever minor right party wants to participate. And we say to them, all your members are invited to this meeting at the Melbourne Town Hall. Okay, so that might be 3,000 to 4,000 people there. One Nation, Libertarians, Trumpets, okay? And all those participating parties, let's say there's 6 parties that participate, they can all put forward one candidate who should be the top of a joint Senate ticket. So One Nation would put forward a candidate, we'd put forward a candidate. Now, then it'd be like a Liberal Party pre-selection, but there's going to be 3,000 or 4,000 people in the room. And they get up and hear a 10-minute speech from each of these candidates, and then they answer questions for 10 minutes. Then they're off the stage, then the next guy comes up, or gal. And then at the end of that, everyone who's in the room gets to have a vote on who they think should be the leader of a joint ticket with all 6 parties represented on it. Now, some critics of this could say,
sorry, excuse my ignorance, but that's that's a formal tool that can be used in the process. You can run on a joint ticket like that, so it's a legitimate legal entity.
Yes. Well, we have the coalition between Liberals and Nationals. That's a thing. But at the last federal election in New South Wales here, the Libertarians were actually in a joint coalition with 2 other little minor parties, and all 3 parties were named there.
Okay.
So the critics, someone who, if they wanted to find a hole in this proposal, could say, oh well, look, if there's 3,000 people there, and say, that there's 1,200 members of One Nation, for example, then all those members of One Nation, which is almost 50%, are going to vote for whoever the One Nation candidate is. Okay, but I don't believe that's the case. I believe everyone there'll be some people who want to do that. Most people are going to want to win. Okay, and they're going to vote for the candidate that has a combination of A, wise policies, and B, popularity.
Electability.
Both important things. And who can give a good speech, in front of 3,000 or 4,000 people. That's quite daunting for most people. And then we would have a vote, and then let's say the Libertarians come first, and One Nation comes second, and the Trumpets come third, and others, then we just put a joint ticket there with these 6 candidates. Now, it'll be different in each state depending upon who's the best candidate. Now, if we do that, I think just televising it live, we invite media like your good self in there, and we just say, it'll just build up anticipation. We'd need to have, we'd need good candidates, and it could also encourage candidates who may not currently be involved in the minor right. They might say, you know what, I'd like to be a senator. I think I can do a good job. I'll get up and talk to all these guys, and maybe they'll elect me at the top of the ticket. It'll be harder for someone who's an outsider, but if they're brilliant, they will. So that's what I think we do need to do. And then if that worked well, then maybe we could look at a more sort of formal, sort of, closer collaboration. So I think that's 90%
the best. of the policies you're in agreement with, so it's only on the little fringe issues that there's a difference anyway. What's the feeling that you get from the other parties regarding an idea like that?
Well, I actually came up with this idea about sort of 3 months before the federal election, and it was too late to propose it for this, although we sort of did it in New South Wales. Okay. We didn't have a Democratic vote. Our party executives were. Well, the Libertarians had a Democratic vote on who our candidate would be, which was Craig Kelly. Look, we've got time to sort it out. So we just got to see where. Now, I suppose we need to let the dust settle on this election now, because we don't know who's got elected to the Senate for about another, 2 weeks, I think. It's very hard to count all these Senate ballot papers, because you've got people preferencing all over the place. So it's a process. And it's still quite possible that One Nation might win 4 or 5 senators, or they might win none. Now, I think that Malcolm Roberts in Queensland will win, and we all love Malcolm. But that's not 100%. It's likely. It's probably 80%, I'm guessing. But in the other states, I understand from people who do know how to read these numbers better than me, but One Nation's got about a 15 to 20% chance in all the other states.
Okay, a 15 to 20% chance based on needing that 14-ish% to actually get, or a 15% out of 100% to actually win a seat.
Well, look, One Nation got the most votes for the minor right, and so so what will happen? Let's say they got 6% in New South Wales or something, and then the Libertarians
the preferences from the other right parties go to them, and that's what I'm saying. When you're saying there's a 15% chance, you mean there's an 85% chance none of them win, or you mean they've got a decent chance of just tipping over that threshold into getting a seat?
Well, what I'm saying is let's say Malcolm's running one in Queensland. In the other 5 states, each of them individually have a 15% chance of One Nation winning in Tasmania or Western Australia. So in each state, it's definitely a possibility. But when you put 5 possibilities together, who knows what could happen?
You wind up with
So that's now. Look, if One Nation if things go really well for them, and they end up, they've already got Pauline there. She's there for at least another 3 years. Then they've got Malcolm's very likely to get elected. If they happen to get another 4 or 5 senators, which is unlikely but not impossible, well, they've arrived as a pretty serious force.
Yeah. Regarding the preferences, it was something that I was noticing in the media. This constant talk of the party that you vote for giving your preferences to other parties, and this seems to be something that upsets a lot of people. My understanding of the system, and from speaking to Topher Field, who you've spoken to, is that's not how it works. The preferences are your preference, and it's you choose in what order you want the vote to fall so that it actually means something. Am I wrong? And assuming I'm not wrong, and Topher is right about exactly how the preference system works, why is the media and everybody seemingly pushing this concept that's so false and untrue? Because it's putting a lot of people off voting for different parties, because the media is reporting that party is now preferencing other parties. Why? What is this about? It seems so damaging and not positive to anybody.
For politically interested people, which is probably, like the activists, sort of like ourselves, they're probably only like 2% of the population, and we all very easily understand how preferences work. Okay. But so many Australians do not understand how they work. And I really believe the Electoral Commission does a lot of advertising before an election. They should advertise, spell out like Topher does so well, spelling out how the preferences work. And since they're not doing that, it's very confusing. And so there's probably people out there that say, I really like the Libertarians, but I don't want to risk Albo, so the safe thing to do is to vote one Liberal. Okay, I'm sure that happens. Now, then the other really tragic thing is that a lot of people, let's say your favourite minor right party is One Nation. You really don't like Albo, and you'd want him to lose, and you want Dutton to win, but you do like Pauline Hanson and One Nation more than you like Peter Dutton. So what they should do is they should vote, and they also like the Libertarians, maybe not as much, and they like Clive Palmer, maybe not as much, but they really do want Liberals to win ahead of Labor. So you and I understand, well, they should vote one Pauline, 2 Libertarians, 3 Clive Palmer, maybe 1 or 2 other little parties, and then put the Liberals there. Now, what's probably going to happen there, that probably their vote is going to end up with the Liberal Party, probably. Okay, but and let's hope it doesn't, because it means a minor right guy's got elected. Good.
That's right.
But what happens
and their
tragically
preference was recognised.
Sorry, what was that?
And their preference is recognised. I think it's an
That's right.
absolutely fabulous
That's
voting
right.
system, one of the best in the world. But
No, I agree with that.
it's
It is. That's
misrepresented.
one very good thing about the Australian electoral process. It shouldn't be
Yeah.
compulsory preferential, like it's
No,
not here in
agreed.
New South
100%.
Wales. You should
Yeah.
say, look, there's only one party I like and I hate the rest of them. I only want to vote for one, and you should have the freedom to do that. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's how we do it in New South Wales. But what should happen? But this is the tragedy. So many good people out there who like. Let's use the example. They like One Nation, and they might like Libertarians and others as well, but not as much as they like One Nation. They vote One Nation, 2 Liberal, and 3
Mm.
Libertarian, and 4 Club Parliament. So what
Yeah.
they've very likely done is just voted Liberal, and they think they don't understand why. Okay, so now at the 2022 federal election and at the 2025 federal election, a lot of people, a lot of good people, Topher Field's probably the best, but there's many others, have urged their voters, say, look, please vote for us, and then after that, vote for One Nation, vote for Clive Palmer, vote for the shooters, vote for the
Yes.
Christians,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
then put
Vote
the
for the
Liberals.
freedom parties.
Vote for the
Yeah.
freedom. We could not have tried harder, but about half of our voters don't do it. They vote 1 Libertarian, 2 Liberal. They just don't get it. Half of them do, half of them don't. So this is why I like the idea of a big joint coalition ticket. Then we will stop that crippling
It
leakage.
solves that problem. Yeah. But that problem is coming from the media, who seems to be the biggest enemy of all of the freedom parties. How do you, I mean, obviously Trump revolutionized social, well, maybe not Trump, but the use of social media is one of the tools in the arsenal. What is it about the media that, I mean, they they ignore the freedom parties and then ridicule the freedom parties? They're the only two versions of events that you get from the mainstream media about any of the libertarian or the freedom based parties. Where's that coming from, and how do you get around it?
I think the biggest factor is that all the freedom parties were right on everything to do with COVID, and the mainstream media was entirely wrong on everything to do with COVID. And I
Yep.
feel like we've sort of embarrassed them to some extent, and they don't want to admit that. And they sort of demonized us. Okay, and they said, take your vax, take your vax, take your vax, take your 15th booster. And we sat back and said, no, 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 we're not taking them.
Mm-hmm.
And we made them look stupid because they were so hysterical and crazy about silly COVID, particularly in Australia and New Zealand and Canada. And
Yep.
so we were the real, and look, also on global warming, we say, look, there's some people in the freedom movement that think carbon dioxide's making the world a bit hotter, but they think, well, there's not much we can do about it, or we can adapt to it, and it's not going to be that serious, and it might even be good. They might be right. I basically believe the whole thing's hocus pocus. That's fine,
Likewise.
but the media is entirely invested in the global warming religion, and so they just want to basically not platform us. Now, you mentioned social media. The minor right does have a good presence on the social media, a million times better than the stupid Liberals and Nationals, because we can say edgy things, funny things. They just have to be so plain vanilla on their social media. You go to the Liberal Party Twitter account, no one looks at it. But look, it's not translating into that many votes. But we all know that social media every year grows in its reach and its influence. There's less and less people watching the nightly news. I mean, I don't know who buys newspapers anymore, like the physical edition.
No. Yeah.
So as social media increases, then but I mean, that's going to take time. It's going up, but it's still, it's the mainstream media still is the biggest issue when it comes to the results in federal elections. It's declining,
It
but it's
really
still a big
is.
debt.
Yeah. But the strange thing to me is that Australians are very, very active on social media, and yet somehow the mainstream media has still got all of the attention and all of the buy-in, and they keep lying constantly. Nothing they say is true. COVID was the best evidence of that showed it to a lot of people, and yet people keep on listening to these, stupid lying people. I don't see what it is that makes Canada and Australia, who are very tech savvy, online and into social media, not respond like they are all around the world, where they're going away from the mainstream media and the mainstream parties. Don't know.
There's an enormous amount of people out there who political activists don't bump into that often. but their whole life is based around what's on Channel 9 on Sunday night, what's on 7 on Tuesday evening. It's Married at First Sight, or it's some crap. And they really are politically. That's right. And they are really tuned out, and they only know an election is coming around. People like you and me count down the days to an election, right? It's what we do. It's our Super Bowl. But there's a lot of people, it only occurs to them there's an election on because they see TV ads. That's the first time that they realise there's an election. Okay. And that's a lot of people. Okay. So I think I agree with you strongly that the preferential voting is unusual around the world. Like, it's not many countries do it, but it is superior. Okay. It's a far more democratic outcome on the preferences. But something that Australia does dreadfully, which is crippling us, is the compulsory voting. Now, you think about the
all the people who don't give a damn being forced to vote. How's that going to work?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Now, who are they going to vote for? Liberal or Labor? And what are they going to vote on? What are they going to vote? They're going to vote on, oh, he looks nicer than him. That's what it's going to come down to. Now, if you think about the last 3 presidential elections in America, Trump versus Hillary, Trump versus Biden, Trump versus Kamala. Okay. People like you and me and a lot of people around the world were on the edge of our seats watching, and a lot of people in America were. But, on election day, something like it varies, but it's something about sort of 30% of Americans on election day say, no, I don't care who wins. I'm not voting. Yeah. And I say, good on you. And their passion in life might be studying butterflies or stamp collecting or, what the hell ever. If they're not interested, that's a form of voting. Now, what we do in Australia, which says the state is going to fine you if you don't vote. Okay, now that means that we'd probably have 30% of people in Australia would say, I really don't care. I don't want to go and line up. I don't want to vote. I don't care. And we should respect that opinion. And there's sometimes people who are really politically interested, they'll still say they don't want to vote because they'll say, I hate them all. Okay, that's also, they should have the freedom to do that. So we have this dreadful situation with compulsory voting where Peter Dutton can think, I don't care about the right-wing base because they're going to vote for me eventually. And he's largely right. They might have to do it through preferences, but he's largely right. And the same with Albanese. He says, I don't have to appeal to the left-wing base because they're going to vote for me one way or another. So all they're trying to do is they're desperately trying to win that 20, 30% in the middle who don't care. And so they just, and then if you sort of say something bold and radical, which might be exactly what the country needs.
I'll give you $1,000 extra on the deposit of your next house or something like that, or 25 cents a litre off your petrol for a year. That's right.
So we really do need to look at this compulsory voting thing. And what it will mean is, our elections will be a lot more about substantive policy because the leader of the Liberal Party or whoever the major centre-right party is, they can't take the base for granted. So it's just as important to win someone from the base as it is to win someone from the centre. It's all one vote. So they've got to go out there and make the case about ideas.
Well, I imagine it would also have that, the law of unintended consequences is that you might actually get more political involvement from the populace because all of a sudden it starts to matter when they sit out some elections and get results that they don't like. Then maybe they actually start paying attention to the ones a little bit further down the track. I mean, I agree. You're always going to have 30% that just don't care, and it makes no difference. Most of my life, I didn't care because it didn't affect my life. I started caring the moment that it actually impacted my life. A lot of these policies, they come from the UN. Let's just be straight. Most people now, the hysteria is, I don't know, but I don't think that the green agenda is quite so beloved as it was a few years ago, especially as power prices are going up and it's actually hitting people in the hip pocket. But the immigration, the censorship, the green agenda, all of these things, you go to the UN website and in the footer of the page, it's just the laundry list of all of the most hated policies in all of the Western nations of the world that are just crippling us economically and in terms of freedom. What is the carrot and stick being used to the people in power to follow these policies that nobody wants, nobody likes, and is losing them elections and popularity around the world?
Look, it's a really interesting question. And if you'd asked me this pre-COVID, I would have said, no, I don't believe that's the case. But
Yeah.
what we saw during COVID and what we've seen post-COVID is clear collaboration, particularly amongst the English-speaking countries,
Yes.
also in Western Europe. But these people with a big globalist agenda, they don't care about Bangladesh or Bolivia or Botswana.
Mm.
They care about the powerful countries, the rich countries, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly the English-speaking countries. Now, they are clearly in cahoots because, once they saw during COVID, I think they were licking their lips, these big central planners. They saw during COVID, oh, wow, we can treat the people like farm animals and 85% will just go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, they thought, oh, there's 15% that resisting it. Gee, that's not much. If COVID had happened in the 1970s or the 1980s, there wouldn't have been 100,000 people out in the streets of Sydney and Melbourne. There would have been 2 million.
There would have been 1 million.
Okay, people wouldn't have put up with this crap. Okay,
yeah.
And it would have been overruled, and there would have been cabinet resignations. If Malcolm Fraser or Bob Hawke had done it, ministers would have said, I can't be a member of this cabinet. It's locking people down, forcing an injection into them over a bad flu, if that. But when they saw during COVID, they thought, oh, wow, this is great. Remember during COVID, if you walk out in the public, you're going to get Ebola, you're going to die. Oh, but the bottle shop's okay. The bottle shop's okay. Why the bottle shop? They wanted to keep us in a stupor. A lot of people developed drinking problems during COVID because you couldn't catch COVID/Ebola if you went to the bottle shop. Okay, so it was all that crap. Now, but I think these people saw during COVID. They thought, geez, we can do a lot more than we can do a lot of what we want to do faster than we ever imagined. We can bring in these this central planning, this big state globalist agenda. Now then some of your viewers might sound like a bit kooky, okay? But look, you think about it. Once COVID, as soon as COVID was behind us, all across the English-speaking world, they bring in these misinformation laws, these safety commissioner laws, okay? They even did it in the United States. Joe Biden tried to bring in misinformation laws. Now, I thought immediately, well, this won't last 1 second in the Supreme Court, and it didn't. Thank you to the American founding fathers who said, you're not allowed to do this crap. Nice and black and white, First Amendment.
Yeah.
Okay, but the rest of us don't have that protection. So they've slammed through all these laws, and it was like the same thing in the same countries at the same time. Is this a coincidence?
With the same slogans and the same rationales, and it was all scripted.
Mm. That's right. The slogans and the rationales, the same talking points, okay?
Yep.
And then, of course, they've been doing this for 20 years with the global warming crap, the transgender crap, okay? The whole lot. It definitely seems coordinated. Now,
and like I say, sorry, but it's these are all line items in the footer of the UN website, every single page. The transgender thing, it's on the UN website. What the hell does transgenderism have to do with the UN? But it's there as one of their topics. The misinformation censorship, all UN's and that's a scary thing. You go and there's this list. It's got to be 25, 30 items. It's every single one of these things that we're talking about. And it gets, boo-hooed as a conspiracy theory. And you're like, it's literally on the homepage of the UN website. The forced vaccinations, the, CBDCs, national ID systems, just all of these draconian dystopian types of things that everyone said was a conspiracy theory. They're all there, just all listed out for all to see. And yet everyone still denies them as a conspiracy theory. Like the Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset, which I had on my iPad and was reading because he released that around about May, I think, 2020, a month after the whole lockdown thing had started. He somehow wrote and published a book on the Great Reset based on COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm reading the book and watching the news, which is saying that book doesn't exist. It's a conspiracy theory. It's on Amazon in Kindle and paperback edition. All of these things are right there, but it's literally being lied about to our faces in the mainstream media so that you can't talk about them. And then the policies are implemented. And it's a real bugbear.
Well, I was not aware that's on the UN website. When we finish this, that's the first thing I'm going to look at, David. So thank you for telling me about it. The UN was set up, we had these two horrific world wars in the first half of the last century, horrific. And then, probably a good idea for the countries of the world to come together and say, look, let's have a little forum where we can have representatives from each country. Won't have much power, won't really have any power, but it can be a little club where we get together and sort of try and iron out these problems, okay? Now, the Libertarians are always suspicious of these institutions because they start off not with much power, then they grow with time, okay? So the UN is sort of positioning itself, not I don't think they want it to become a world government, but who needs a one world government when you can get all the governments of the world to agree with you anyway?
Correct.
Okay. And another part of their agenda is, of course, the Holy Ukraine War. They think it's a great idea to have a superpower conflict right on the doorstep of Russia. This is just the craziest thing of all time. Remember, we went straight out of COVID, straight into Ukraine. Same idiots just, this is
literally
Putin's
same
Hitler,
day.
Putin.
Putin crossed the border, and all of a sudden the flu suddenly disappeared. Nobody wanted to talk about that anymore. Yeah.
So look, it's now you've had the World Economic Forum at Davos, which seems to be unraveling. Good. Mr. Klaus has been, he says he's resigned, but I think there was a lot more to it. So that's good to see. That's falling apart. I think what happened, Damon, is that during the 20th century, or particularly after World War II, the threat of communism was a big deal, and it was a real threat. Okay, you had the Soviets, the Soviet Union, then they took over the most populous country in the world, China. They took over half of Europe, took over half of Asia, got a foothold in South America, Africa, Middle East. Communism was on the march. Communism killed 100 million people in the process. There was communists in powerful positions in Australia, undeclared communists. It came out, 5-10 years ago that there was 2 members of the Australian Communist Party in Bob Hawke's cabinet. Okay, so communism was a real threat, and we defeated it. Okay, thanks to Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and many, many other good people. And there was lots of activists involved in good organisations who contributed to bringing down communism. And then it was a glorious thing. In 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down, and most people remember that. But more significant was the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991.
That's right, 91, yeah.
Victory for capitalism and democracy. Now, I think what happened then, Damon, was that those right-wing activists who helped bring down communism, they thought, this is great. I don't need to worry about politics anymore. Freedom, liberal democracy is one for all time. And that's what I thought. And I was at university at the time, and I this was just days after the Yeltsin stood on the tank in Moscow and brought down the Soviet Union. And I said, this is fantastic. This is fantastic. Who's going to ever argue with free market economics and democracy ever again? And one of my mates said to me, he said, no, John, the left they won't admit they were wrong. They're still going to try and bring about their big state through the back door. And I said, no, they won't. No. He was right. I was wrong. Okay, so they're coming in through the green agenda. So they don't really want to learn. But what has happened is that when the Cold War was over, the right-wing activists sort of said, I'll go into business. I'll go and do other things.
That's right. I'll go off do more important things. Yeah,
that's right.
The battle's won.
But
yeah,
the left just set out on this agenda to capture institutions. Okay,
of course.
And so we've now, the generation after that, we've now got this position where the left is all supreme. Okay, now this is why I love Trump. Thank God Trump won.
Yeah.
And he can sort of in the most powerful country in the world. He's got a lot of political authority now. Putting everything else aside, Trump's funny. He's just funny.
He's hilarious. And
you look at his wonderful family. They're all terrific people. And they're having lovely kids and grandkids. He's had 3 wives, and people say, he's an immoral person because he's had 3 wives. Well, those 3 wives were 2 ex-wives and Ivanka. Melania, they used to hang out together. Okay, they used to be friends. They used to go shopping together. They used to have lunch together. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that Trump's a nice guy.
They're all right with the deal.
That's right. They just thought they all love him. They've never had anything bad to say about him. But so and then there was the assassination attempts on him. I don't think they're going to try and do that again because I think they even dislike Vance more than Trump.
That's true. But then again, Comey's little seashells incident from the other day is going to be interesting to see how that washes out. Hopefully it opens an investigation into the rest of his shenanigans from the past for Hillary and the like, though I'm not holding my breath for any of that. But I absolutely agree with you. I think it's phenomenal. We've never seen, not in my lifetime anyway, a politician. I can't even fathom a politician filling a football stadium with people, with another 100,000 people outside in the car park to hear a politician talk. And then to go, he's widely despised and hated by most of the community. You're like, sure as hell doesn't look like that, you know? And the international media was reporting what you said earlier about Trump being one of the reasons for the Labor win in Australia. And I still can't see how. Is there that much hatred and in Australia? Like, I didn't think people would care enough.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying before about that 20 to 30% of people who really don't want to vote, but we're forcing them to vote. Now, these people are out there watching, you know, Married at First Sight and all this other crap. Yeah. And they barely even watch the 6 o'clock news. They might have it on in the background while they're making dinner, okay, but they're not paying attention to it. They don't read the newspapers. But you can't ignore Trump. You can be in the middle of, you know, the Amazon jungle and you've heard about Donald Trump, right, or the Papua New Guinea Islands. You know about Trump. So these people have just sort of been told for 9 years now, Trump's evil, Trump's evil, Trump's evil.
Yeah.
And then half of them probably don't even know what a tariff is, okay? And the truth is, you know, Trump, you know, look, I'll be critical of Trump when he deserves criticism, and he does deserve criticism over his stupid tariffs, particularly against Canada, America's best friend, Canada. You know, it's the biggest border in world history, you know, between Canada and the United States. And so, you know, they're like brothers. They're like brothers, you know, they're family. And Trump goes out there and genuinely does whack on a massive tariff, okay? And I think reality's clobbered him over the head on his stupid tariffs. Thank God for that. The market's turned on him. But I think that I was not expecting it to be the case, that there would be this backlash, but I think there was this backlash. I mean, because what else explains it? I mean, you know, we might criticise Peter Dutton for not being that popular. Gee, look at Anthony Albanese. He comes across as such a mediocre type of a guy. I mean,
he's appalling.
Think about recent Labor prime ministers. Gough Whitlam might have been a democratic socialist, but he was a very, very impressive human being. Now, he might have bad prime minister, bad policies, but he was an impressive guy. Bob Hawke, Rhodes Scholar, impressive guy. Paul Keating, pretty impressive guy. Kevin Rudd, I despise that jerk. I despise Kevin Rudd.
I can't stand that man. Yeah, a little weasel.
Yes, he is. But look at his CV. Pretty smart guy, right? Okay, Albanese.
But definitely infinitely more impressive than Albanese, yes.
That's right. Albanese is a young Labor hack, okay? He's just happened to be in the system. And I actually think he's probably, you know, personally, he'd probably be a good bloke to watch the footy with. I think he's actually, I really don't like Rudd. I really don't like Turnbull, okay, on a personal basis, besides their policies. I think Albanese is probably reasonably likeable bloke, okay?
On his side, he'd probably be a laugh at the pub. He'd be,
But he's just a bloke. He is not an outstanding person in any way. He's mediocre. I mean, Keating, Hawke, even Rudd were impressive. Malcolm Turnbull's extremely impressive guy. Now, he's one of the worst of all, okay? But, I mean, look at his CV, you know. This Albo is just a dud, okay?
You wouldn't let him run a milk bar because you know he'd cock it up and it would go bankrupt. And yet they've given him the keys to the kingdom. It's insanity. But
so the interesting thing about it... Sorry, you go.
No, you please continue.
Oh, look, the interesting thing that I haven't really heard all the genius pundits, all these pundits paid money to go and pontificate about the election now, and they're all left. Most of them are lefties, and they want to sort of give the Liberal Party free advice. Oh, you've got to be nice to women, got to be nice to blah 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 blah. Okay, move to the left. Okay, that's what they want. Okay, but you read these stories in the paper. It's the same story every day. But the interesting thing that I haven't heard pundits talk about is what will Albanese, who's clearly in a very strong political position now, doesn't have an election for 3 years, he's into his second term, how's he going to govern in this term? Now, I think that he's pretty deep down, you know, pretty left-wing, pretty socialist, okay, but I think also as time has gone on, he's enjoying the trappings of office. He's got a nice young fiancée there. He's enjoying living in the lodge in Kirribilli House. He's enjoying all the adulation. So
he's dressing a lot better these days, and those new glasses that he's got, they're pretty sharp too. So, yeah.
So I'm thinking, will Albo now in this position, will he say to himself, "Look, I love being the Prime Minister of Australia. I want to sort of try and beat Bob Hawke. He won 4 Labor federal elections." And if that's his calculation, he says, "Look, I love being the Prime Minister. I want to make history." The smartest thing he could do would move to the centre. Okay. Or he might say, "Look, I'm a hardcore socialist. I was a Trotskyite when I was at Sydney University or whatever. Now's the time to bring about, really hardcore left-wing positions." I don't know how he's going to go. Okay, if I had to bet my life on it, I would not feel confident about it, but I'd say I reckon he's going to go centrist, which is not good for the Liberal Party. If he's going to move to the centre, it's just going to diminish their space even more.
Is there room to even move to the centre, though? I mean, the policies as they are and the direction that they're going is towards more green energy, more debt, more government, all of the things that I said at the start. How do you bring those things back to the centre? I mean, you're so far in wackadoodle land to the left. I mean, is it even feasible to do that? I understand the concept, but
he could. He did recently. Soon after the election, he ended tariffs on European luxury cars. Okay, now that would seem like a smart economic thing to do, quite libertarian. But I think that was part of this new trade deal they're trying to do with the EU. So it wasn't really a calculated decision. Look, he might just want to sort of bumble along and just sort of say, we'll just sort of deal with issues as they come up and we won't really have a big agenda. He didn't really campaign on much at the election. But
he didn't.
But what he's done in office, I've been here in the New South Wales Parliament for just over 2 years, and I can tell you, the first thing that shocked me, and I've been a global boiling denier since at least 20 years. So it's all crap. They're making it up. It's a replacement for religion, the new apocalypse and all this crap.
Yep.
And I knew that I'd be speaking out on the global boiling delusion, and I knew that everyone here, with very few exceptions, has fallen for it. But I am still shocked by how obsessive everybody is about it. Obsessed. They can bring in a bill, Damon, on parking fines or education.
People lose their mind.
They get global warming in there somehow. It's their big religion. They've got everything comes back to global warming, and guess what? It's not getting hotter. It's all made up.
No, that's right. Yeah, racism apparently affects. Global warming apparently affects black people and minorities and lesbians more than it does white male heterosexual Christians. Yeah, it's insanity.
Crap like that every day. Crap. And then, Rowan Dean on the Outsiders show had a thing about all these headlines from around the world. So, from the Swedish newspaper, big breaking headline: climate change will affect Sweden more than any other country. Same in Argentina, same in Canada. Every country, their journalists say it's going to affect us more than anybody else.
More than anybody else. I'm writing an article at the moment about, I was in Dubai during the flood last year. And leading up to the flood, the UAE government was talking about the cloud seeding, which they're very, very proud of because it's part of their whole, futuristic technology push that they're into. It's like, we even control the weather here, so it's just paradise on earth. And there was a low pressure system coming in, and they seeded it, and it turned into $3 billion worth of damage. And I was stuck in my little community area for about 10 days because all 4 exits were fully underwater. You couldn't drive out. And shortly after it happened, they disavowed any knowledge of cloud seeding. Cloud seeding, that's chemtrails, that's a conspiracy theory. What are you talking about? We would never do such a thing, because the insurance bill had come in. Obviously, if it was a natural event, then all of these garages there were entire garages full of tens of millions of dollars of supercars that were all just completely submerged underwater and the cars completely lost. And all of this stuff was being claimed. And the insurance companies were, well, you seeded the clouds and you caused this event, so you're liable. And that, no, don't know. You know what the papers are saying now when you ask about the floods? Climate change caused it. Everyone in the UAE who was there knows exactly what happened. It's like they were disavowing any knowledge of it because they were going to take liability for it. So now it's gone on to climate change. So Yeah,
Well, that's very
it's
interesting.
absolutely.
I want to look into that. I do remember those reports of very unusual, dangerous floods in the UAE. So I will. That sounds fascinating. But you're right. Anything that ever happens, climate
Yep,
change. You know,
it's
any
climate
hot
change.
day, climate change. Cold day, climate change. You know, drought, climate change. Flood, climate change. Okay, so
Yep,
it's
and we just
a religion that
and
answers
perhaps we'll
every
fix it.
question. But
Yeah,
they require the state. They require the violence of the state to enforce it. And you know what I haven't seen, Damon? I haven't seen a poll for 20 years saying, what do you believe climate change is true? I'd love to see the Sydney Morning Herald publish it. You know, they could ask 5 questions. Do you believe climate change is an imminent apocalyptic threat? Because that's what they tell us. Or is it true, but it's not that bad? Or you're not sure? Or is it, do you deny it's happening? Or, you know, it could be happening, but it's probably, you know, they could rank it. But they're not interested.
or
I would
perhaps
love to
the
do it.
question. You know what would be interesting would be the to ask people the question, what percent do you think the climate is changing? Of course it is, it's always changing. What percentage of the change do you think humans are responsible for?
Good question.
Actually force people to actually think, I I I don't know, you know.
Mm.
It's been warmer than this during history, it's been colder than this during history. We're somewhere around the middle vaguely, you know. So do you think that this climate change now is 90% caused by humans, 10% caused by humans? How? Because that would really be the question. I've seen interviews of people who are big climate change believers, and they've said, how much is it worth to you? And these people are also, what's the most important thing in the world? We're all going to be dead in 12 years. We've got to get onto this right away. And the interviewer said, okay, well, what if it cost you $1,000 a month? And they're like, oh no, I couldn't do that. And then they're like, well, $500. I mean, it is the most important thing in the world. How much do you spend on your rent and all the rest? Wouldn't it be at least worth that? It's like, no. And virtually everyone they asked, it wound up coming down to $10, maybe $20 a month sort of thing. It's like, it's very, very important in my heart, but not so much in my wallet. And that's why they use the power of the state to extract the money from the wallet under the threat of violence. So last question for you. Sorry to get carried away. Where to from here for the Libertarian Party in New South Wales and more broadly, given what's happened at the election?
Well, look, we did have a disappointing result. Okay, so we got about 2% in New South Wales, less in other states. So that's for the Senate race. Okay, so now to get elected to the New South Wales Upper House, we need roughly 3%. Okay, so we're going to put in a big effort to hopefully get someone elected here in 2027. Now, look, we are very excited about Javier Milei in Argentina. We like Trump, but we love Milei, and he's doing a brilliant job. And you know, Milei himself and supporters, you know, I said it in Parliament, I think, before he got elected or before he's inaugurated. We said, look, things that we got some tough love to give to this Argentinian economy. So expect things to actually get worse for 2 years because we need to take the medicine and then we can really start to rebound with strength. Now, I said that because this is what happened when Reagan and Thatcher came in, that they actually became very unpopular for the first 2 years. And the polls were really bad because their shock therapy, they had to kill the inflation that the West had in the 1970s. And they said, look, the most important thing is to kill the inflation. And unemployment went up and the GDP went down. And everyone's saying, oh, this Thatcherism and this Reaganism stuff isn't working. And Thatcher was told, you've got to do a U-turn. You've got to reverse this. She says, I'm not doing a U-turn because it's going to work. Stay with us. She was right. Reagan was right. Now everyone looks back and says, gee, the economy was great under Reagan and Thatcher, but they forget the first 2 years. So I expected it to be a repeat in Argentina. But the surprising thing is bang, straight away, boom. Okay, and I think what had happened is Argentina had already hit the bottom. You couldn't go down any further.
Yeah.
It would be like having a country, they were as rich as Australia 100 years ago, less than 60 years ago. It'd be like having Gough Whitlam as your prime minister, not for 3 years, but for 60 years. Okay, really wreck the joint. Okay, so the Malay Revolution is bearing fruit straight away. Now, not only is he like super duper smart, he's written 50 academic papers on economics, and not only is he a purist libertarian,
Yeah.
He's an anarcho-capitalist. He's really hardcore. Okay.
Yeah.
But he's also got this wonderful quality that's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it, called charisma. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Even the Sydney Morning Herald and the ABC want to talk about Malay just because he's sexy, he's cool, right? He's funny. Okay. So he's smart, he's got the right policies, and he's highly charismatic. And he's turning around a total mess. And what happened as soon as he came in there, foreign investors haven't wanted to touch the old Argentina for a very long time because you invest your money in there and it just disappeared through inflation and government corruption and everything else. The foreign investment is flooding in. People are getting jobs. Yep. The inflation's coming under control. They are really turning it around. Now, the big test for Malay, there was an election. Buenos Aires is the capital of Argentina, but it's also its own little state. They had an election in Buenos Aires last night, and the Malay forces did well. Good news. But they have the Argentinian constitution, like a lot of the South American republics, is very similar to the American Constitution. The Americans got independence in the 1780s, and then the Spanish colonies, within a couple of generations after that, had copied what the Americans did, and their constitution is similar. So the reason I mention that is Malay has a 4-year term, but he has congressional elections, midterm elections in October this year. Now, at the moment in the Congress, Malay's party's got 20%. This is a party that only started, with 2 men and a dog a little earlier, but they've got 20%. He's been able to get a fair bit through the Congress because you've got the equivalent of the Liberal Party there. They've got numbers and they're somewhat helpful as well. But what could happen after October is that Malay's party has full control of the Congress. And that's what we are seeing now is just the beginning. Now, it may not happen. Often in midterm elections, there's a bit of a setback, as we were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
Trump's probably going to have a midterm setback, in 2 years' time. Probably, because that's usually what he did. He did in 2018. He had a setback. But Malay might beat that pattern and he might sort of really get control. And then we can really, really show the world how great libertarianism is. So what do we do here in the New South Wales Libertarian Party? We are absolutely convinced that we're right about everything. Okay, so we're not going to buckle. We're not going to change our policies. We may not get elected, okay, but maybe we will. And we do believe that what the world needs more than anything else is a very, very, very small government, okay? We want the government to be like a night watchman. The less they do, the better. If you've got a little town and you've got a night watchman there who stays up at night and there's so much peace and prosperity in the town, there's no bad things are happening, then the night watchman can go to sleep. That's what we want the government to be, just to be there in case there's an emergency, but a real emergency, not a COVID emergency, not a global warming emergency. The government can be there, but we basically want to give people maximum freedom because we know it works. We look at history, so the smaller the government are, the more prosperous and peaceful the citizens are. So we're not going to buckle on that, and we're just going to persist, and we hope that we can continue to convince more and more Australians, as we have hopefully done tonight on your show.
I certainly hope so too, John. I couldn't agree more. Love your work. Keep it up. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Damon. Look forward to doing it again.